Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Leo from Future Networks, and today we have a banger of an episode. We're joined by Geodnet founder, Mike Horton. Mike, welcome onto the channel.
Thanks for having me, Leo. Super glad to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Very excited. I've been looking forward to this one. I think Geodnet is definitely what I would classify as an OG DePIN project, definitely one of the top tier projects in this space. So looking forward to getting into it. I think to set the scene for anyone watching or listening, we can have a very quick introduction into what Geodnet is. And then I really want to focus on what's kind of happened up to now and then what you guys are focused on going forwards. So yeah, maybe to kick off, if you could give us a brief intro.
Yeah, so my name is Mike Horton. I'm the project creator of Geodnet, and my background is in positioning and navigation, specifically mostly for robotic systems and autonomous systems. I've been working in the field really my whole career. And one of the big challenges with navigation is getting good position accuracy. We use GPS, satellites is our primary way to figure out where we are, but it's just not that accurate. And when you're trying to control a robot or a drone, you tend to need very good accuracy. So a field of corrections has developed over the last 20 years by putting what are called terrestrial base stations up. And Geodnet has become the world's largest such network, and we provide a high accuracy signal to anyone who wants to use it for positioning. And that can be anything from a mobile phone to a surveyor in the field. We have a big emphasis on autonomous systems, robotics, and drones. We think that that's obviously going to really transform the world. And it's a market that both is high volume and high value, and also super needs the Geodnet signal in order to make those systems work.
Amazing. And so I would summarize that for, I guess, the non-technical. To oversimplify it, if you have any device that needs high level of precision, positional accuracy, a great example is a lawnmower, a small lawnmower in your garden. Maybe you've got like a 30-foot drop at the end of the garden. You don't want the lawnmower to fall off it. That needs to know exactly where it is to like the nearest millimeter. Now, hopefully no one has a 30-meter drop in their garden, but as an example, yeah, devices that need super high positional accuracy.
So by the way, I do. And I test these things all the time. And in my driveway, because we're on a little bit of a hill, the driveway slopes down. So the yard comes up to an edge. And if the robot were to go over the edge, it will go off of a cliff and, down about 10 feet drop at the highest point. So that is actually a great analogy. And I appreciate you simplifying. Geodnet, one of our challenges is kind of a hard tech problem. We're dealing with satellites and ionospheric delays and space weather and all this stuff. And so it gets hard for us to sometimes simplify the message. But the basic thing is, on the demand side, we provide a signal that provides super high accuracy positioning. And on the supply side, we have the DePIN community setting up base stations, much like the helium model, where you set up a station on a rooftop and you mine satellite data that's provided to the customers who want this high accuracy signal.
Perfect. And I wanted to jump into the customer side as well, because I think that one of the things that everybody knows Geodnet for is your on-chain revenues. So the burn metrics everyone's looking at, which basically shows how many or how much your customers are paying Geodnet. And there's been some really impressive figures. If anyone who hasn't seen it, go look at the dashboard and look at the month-on-month increase in incoming revenue. This isn't from onboarding fees or anything. This is genuine customer client usage, which is amazing to see. So perhaps you could kind of walk us through, first of all, what are the key customer profiles that are driving that growth and the market segments?
Yeah, super. We'll do that. First, I want to say we're just getting started, and we have a pretty diverse customer base across a fairly good number of industries. But I think we're going to see some bigger customers sort of stick out over time. But at the moment, it's pretty diversified across people kind of getting started with Geodnet, and some customers who've been with us a little bit longer, a couple of years, that have been using and growing with the network. But essentially, at the lowest level, we're supplying data to people who make GPS chips. That would be at the most sort of basic level, where they're using our data to provide augmentation services with their chips, and that could go across anything from automotive to consumer devices to very high-end equipment, because it's kind of getting sold along with the chip. And a great example of that type of customer is Quectel Wireless Solutions. They have a variety of modules that use RTK, and they can utilize the Geodnet network with our service, and they sell the service along with that chip. At the other extreme are people who are already in the field with equipment, who use RTK every day, but they want to switch to something that either provides them better coverage or a lower cost. A great example of that, customer Bad Elf, which sells survey equipment. They're out there with a lot of equipment in the field already that supports RTK. And they have surveyors doing things in construction and mining and mapping and the Esri community and so forth. And those customers have been accustomed to using an RTK service, but sometimes it's not accurate enough for what they want to do, or sometimes the coverage isn't good enough. So we had a case recently with in Wyoming where they went out. One of their customers went out in the field and wanted to do a survey. Thought that everything was there. Thought there was a network there. Turned on, and there was no signal in Wyoming. And luckily, Geodnet has coverage in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and has actually multiple stations there. They were able to turn on, get a signal, and we're super happy. So all the way from chips to end users in the field, we cover. I think a couple of other applications I want to highlight, and kind of in between there that I think are actually super important. Farming is one where we found a great product market fit, because there in the United States, we learned actually from the USDA that only 27% of farmers are using precision agriculture. Now, I thought it was a lot higher than that, honestly, because every single machine from John Deere, AGCO, and Case New Holland is already shipping now pre-configured RTK ready. So the receivers in the machine, the screens in the machine, you just need to set it to use it. But the adoption of actually end users using the service hasn't been as high due to coverage and cost issues. And the USDA is actually running a Geodnet node. We're actually working with them to figure out how to get certain codes that are already kind of funded under the USDA, so farmers could even get reimbursed for using the Geodnet signal. So that's super, super cool vertical. And then my favorite is these smart robots, the lawnmowers and the drones. I think the robot revolution is really coming. We saw Elon last night bringing out the Optimuses, the robo taxis, the robo vans. I mean, this is actually quite real now. You go to a commercial drone show, like we were just at the Commercial UAV Expo, and you're just blown away by all the different use cases, all the different companies deploying things from drone in a box to drone delivery to drone photogrammetry to scanning. The productivity from these tools is very high. You think about robotic mowing. I mean, who really wants to mow their yard? It's not environmentally, it's noisy. You bring an electric machine out, it can do it every day. Your yard looks like a freaking golf course. It's awesome. Like, who doesn't want that? If it's cheap enough, like, who doesn't want that? Everybody wants that. So I think that market's one that we're really leaning into. We seem to have incredible product market fit there. The combination of the quality and the cost and the coverage are all really outstanding. So it's a pretty wide range of applications actually that can use the service. So we do have kind of, at the moment, we have actually kind of a decent amount of revenue from a couple customers, and then smaller amounts kind of peanut butter across more than 30 B2B partners now. But I think you're going to see over the next year in 2025, certain things start to really grow faster. And we're super excited about that, because I think we're really just getting started. The network reached critical mass kind of in 2024 and is starting to really flywheel around usage and positive feedback from customers.
Amazing. I also agree that the autonomous robots space is a super interesting one. It's really cool that you guys seem to have a lot of interest in actually growing markets as well. So as you mentioned, the future's looking pretty bright from that regard. Obviously, all of this is only enabled by the fact that you actually have the base station set up by the Geodnet community, who obviously earn the token rewards for setting them up. So to give you a stat, this year alone in 2024, you've gone from just over 4,000 miners to over 9,500. So was that 139% increase, maybe a bit more in 2024 alone? So what do you put that down to? And maybe what advice would you give other DePIN projects when building out the supply side?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. First of all, we want to thank the DePIN community. It has been tremendous. Anyone who's actually really dug in and used this technology realizes that the closer you are to the base station, the better everything works. And the whole industry has spent 20 years trying to figure out how to get rid of base stations, and none of that really works well, especially on days like today where there's high solar, storm activity. You're just going to really struggle to get good signal and good accuracy without, first of all, if you don't have augmentation, if you don't have a network like Geodnet, your base signal is going to be really terrible. And then if you do, even when you do have a network like Geodnet, the closer you are to the base station, the more likely you're going to be able to work through this sort of violent solar storm activity that's ongoing. So people really, our customers all kind of who've worked with this technology for a while know that more base stations means better performance. And so they love to see that. I think in terms of how to grow a big supply side, I think that the tokenomics are very important and can't be understated. And you have to think these things through up front because you can't change them every day either. You want to grow supply and demand kind of in a coordinated way. I think people like Airbnb and Uber definitely mastered this because imagine if you had 1 million Uber drivers driving around and no demand, that wouldn't work. And imagine if you have 1 million people trying to get home from the airport and no Uber drivers, that doesn't work. Both of those are company destroying, product experiences. So the tokenomics are what make those two things kind of balance. And so you do have to spend quite a bit of time on that. And you're never going to make everyone super happy. There's going to be always some pain in that process. But I think if it's clear and steady, that over time builds confidence and attracts people into the project. And I think simplicity. I still think actually deploying Geodnet could be easier than it is, but it needs to be pretty simple and I think pretty passive. So we're definitely benefit from the passiveness of our network. Once you get it set up and working well, you really don't have to do anything. And we really expect these stations to last many years in the field. It's a pretty set it and forget it type of deal. And not every DePIN can do that. And that doesn't mean that a DePIN that can't do that won't be successful, but it is something that makes life easier. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it boils down to if it's not a device which you can use yourself as the installer and it's going to bring use to you in the day-to-day life and it has to be very passive, it can be more active if the user gets a lot of benefits from it, for example. So
that makes a ton of sense. Totally agree.
Yeah, I think that you guys have you obviously spearheaded this super hex approach as well. So if a client says to you, we want to use it in this specific region, and that region doesn't have any stations, you can use DePIN for what it's made for, basically using token as a coordination mechanism, incentivizing people to set it up in a specific location. So I think that's been really cool to watch how effective that's been as well.
Yeah. And I think we're going to keep, and you can see like right now we don't have any super access to stake just because we're sort of waiting for ones to fill and thinking it through, but we're going to open more. And that's a tool too that we can use while having steady tokenomics that are consistent. We can use that to modulate that signal a little bit where the tokenomics aren't quite, pulling through in an area where we have demand in, and we need to push a little bit more without changing the overall structure of the system. And I think that's been a very good tool indeed. And we appreciate the community helped us think that through. And we really appreciate that was a kind of full circle thing with the community giving us input and so forth. So that's been great. Brazil is a big area next year for us. We've got to figure out how to get Latin America lit up. We're excited. Southeast Asia starting to light up, which is an area where we have some existing customers who want us to get more stations. So we're really fired up about Southeast Asia right now. And then we're going to turn our attention to how do we really solve for Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Peru. These are all places. There's mining in Peru. There's a bunch of farming and ag in Brazil. There's also a bunch of urban applications there. So, and not great coverage of RTK in these places. So that's sort of mass market available. So this is going to be a huge thing for us in 2025.
Yeah, that segues really nicely into my next set of questions, which is about the direction you're going in, the goals for the future. So you just touched upon some geographical expansions that you'd like to go into. So I'd imagine this obviously ties into the demand and revenue generation side of things as well. So at the moment, I think it's around the $1 million ARR mark that you guys are on. Do you have a figure that you guys are working towards?
Yeah, we do. I'd be happy to share that. So, I mean, I think a couple of things. I mean, one big near-term goal we've had is to get to 10,000 stations registered, and we're about to get that. So that's kind of like in the next couple of days. So that's very exciting. I think our big next revenue goal is to try to get to a 10 million ARR. That's going to take a hot minute, but I think not too long. So we're trying our best, and no promises, no financial advice, all that stuff. But I think the pipeline looks very good. Existing customers are definitely growing. And some of those are going to be not always linear. And like business isn't always linear, right? I mean, it sometimes on a chart, things look like a nice curve, but the reality is there are puts and takes, there's wins and losses. Lately for Geodnet, mostly wins, but you never know. And so that's certainly the revenue, short-term revenue goal is to try to get to, a 10x in growth and revenue. It's exciting for us to see. Would be a huge milestone. I think in terms of the network, as I mentioned, 10,000 has been a big milestone for us. So we're there. I think the next big milestone is going to be 20K, and I think we need to do that. That might take more than a year to get there because we need to really focus on areas where we think we can build a big moat. South America is one. Southeast Asia, as I said, is looking really good. We could definitely start working on Africa as well. And these are places where we think that it's very strategic. Some of the existing bigger companies in the field will definitely buy that data because it's really tough to get deployments in those places. And it's enabling. Once you have infrastructure, downstream revenue flows, and that not all that revenue is going to flow to Geodnet. Some of it's going to flow to our customers, which is great. I mean, they can build super successful businesses. So infrastructure is one of these things that it's just like, you put if there was actually a high-speed train between San Francisco and LA, I think the economies of both San Francisco and LA would grow by several, the GDP growth would be several percentage points per year higher just because it's a huge economic enabler and the ROI on that would be phenomenal, but we can't seem to figure out how to get a high-speed train built in our lifetime between LA and San Francisco. And that's what DePIN's so great about, building infrastructure. And then, a ton of downstream economic benefit will occur. If you take someplace like Latin America, that's going to be, really powerful. And the moat is going to be really high because, there isn't a super great solutions there that are available commercially to people. And, it's been that way for 20 years. So we get it done, that's just going to really amplify the moat that Geodnet has.
And on that note as well, so one of the other things that's kind of stood out to me is the partnerships that Geodnet seems to be making, even within the DePIN space. So one example is Wingbits. I think everyone by now knows that you're bringing out a joint mining station together with Wingbits, where people can have a device that covers both networks. So do you see the DePIN space as also a key area for partnerships to grow both supply and demand side?
Yeah, I think that a couple points there. Yeah, certainly for the supply side, I think it can be very helpful to cross-pollinate. If you think about it, if I put myself in the shoes of the miner for a second, I think multi-project mining is pretty attractive. So we're actually, I think, look at this multi-project thing as a very positive because there's then, synergy at that location for the miner and it can help the miner, can also help the token dynamics, I think, fundamentally. Like it's just I think overall a really good thing. So it certainly helps on the supply side. And then for Wingbits in particular, location accuracy is very important to them. Location trust is very important for them. This is a differentiation. And so they have the opportunity to use something like Geodnet to prove the location, level up the hardware and control with tokenomics the distribution to create a more even and more perfect network. So it's a really cool complementary project. I think it's going to be great for both communities.
Yeah, it's funny you were laughing there. I had no idea that the whole of the global aviation industry run off a bunch of hobbyists. Just saying.
Yeah, exactly. Like who would have thought, man?
But you also mentioned that it comes with some token synergies as well. So I'd love to talk about the token. You mentioned to me offline that you're planning next week to bring out a cross-chain bridge to Solana. So obviously, Geodnet as a project is built on Polygon. A lot of DePINs these days seem to have chosen Solana as their home. So why is it a useful thing to bridge that gap and get Geodnet as an asset on Solana?
Well, because if people if we work with other DePIN projects, then you need to burn Geod to use the service, and to when you're a foundation and you're on a chain, you have most of the foundation's assets are on that chain. So if we want to make it easy to use our service and the native token, which a Web3 project, I mean, there's no reason to be doing fiat conversions from a Web3 project to a Web3 project, right? That's the whole point of building these composable stacks of services up. it's super much more convenient to be on the same chain. So that's, I think, reason number one. And then reason number two is community, right? Even saying, hey, look, I could solve the token mechanics through bridging or through batch buying or whatever. There's still, synergy in the community, because it's easier, certainly for people who are just getting in, to have one wallet and to understand one ecosystem than it is to understand multiple. And to the extent that Solana is sort of building up a very strong DePIN ecosystem, which it is, we got to be there.
So I'd love to ask you just some quick fire questions. If we try and keep answers, I don't know, 30 seconds to a minute, really short and snappy.
Tough for me, man. Tough for me. I'll try.
Question number one, quick fire. Why DePIN for Geodnet?
Well, it's massive savings in CapEx, speed, and a cost efficiency. Those are the two major reasons.
Awesome. Number two, what are the differences of running a Web 2 versus a Web 3 business?
Well, I think there are two differences. First, you're running a two-sided business. So you have a business on the Web 3 and a business on the Web 2. And the second is with Web 3, there's a lot of nuances around crypto itself and the community aspect of it that you don't really see in Web 2.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like actually you're running not a Web 3 business, you're running a Web 2 and Web 3 business.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody who's in a two-sided marketplace basically has that. It might be the hardest in DePIN because you're matching typically a pretty serious, professional, complicated Web 2 business, and Web 3 has also got a lot of dynamics. So I always use the example of Uber or Airbnb. Those are two-sided marketplaces. They have a business to run with the drivers. They have a business to run with the riders. But they're kind of similar in the sense that they're both like consumers, and they both have sort of similar. Web 3 is pretty different than Web 2. The enterprise Web 2 has a consensus-based, trust building, a lot of data-driven, decision-making processes that take a while. Web 3, really fast-paced, a lot of change, and they're pretty different. But you gotta marry the two, and that's tricky.
Awesome, great insights there. And leaning into the Web 3 side of that, what are the biggest challenges of scaling a DePIN?
Well, I think tokenomics. I think supply chain. If you have a hardware element, you have to figure that out. We've been blessed with some great partners and a lot of experience, so that's worked out pretty well. But it's still even, it's challenging. You have volatile supply and demand. You have to physically build these things. You don't want people losing money on inventory, and so it's a real issue that you got to work. And you got to keep up. Web3 moves fast, and there's a lot of need for communication and content. We've put a lot of effort into. We're proud. We just announced today hitting 10K YouTube subscribers. It's so as a lot of work to build quality content. It is not easy.
100%. And whatever the challenges have been, like, you guys seem to have been absolutely smashing it from day one. So congratulations on all the traction that you've had so far, all the successes you've had so far. And I'm super psyched to be in it with you on the journey. We've got some stations deployed as well, and I can't wait to see what 2025 and beyond brings for Geodnet.
Appreciate it, Leo. Super. Thanks for your support.
Thanks for coming. Great to speak to you.